So, am I a Brian apologist now? Because he has some valid points. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. I am going to give a little warning to all that if I start talking too fast or you see me wiping sweat off my brow, I am fighting a really gnarly virus right now that's got my temperature going all over the place. So part of the reason why this is delayed, but I could not get on here and talk about this Dexter finale. I got to say that this is, if I were a betting man, I would have lost a lot of money on this series being as good as it actually is. It's probably one of the best things that I've gotten out of the Dexter verse in quite some time. I just had a thoroughly good time with this, and this season finale continues that level of excitement. And now it's left me with like, are we getting a season two? Because I kind of want it. But we'll talk about that when we get there at the end. This episode picks up, and we sort of get the Brian side of getting caught up with where his life went after the separation from Dexter. And so we get to see him. It's a cool little story and a cool little way that they do it. But it's him having his therapy session with Dr. Petrie, who we know he eventually kills. And so it's him sort of explaining to Dr. Petrie, like, here's what happened to me. I lost my brother twice. I've had my brother taken away from me on two occasions, and it shows him, young Brian, sort of coddling and taking care of a young Dexter in the shipping container right after Laura was separated by all the chainsaws and whatnot. And he's sort of taking care of Dexter. He's trying to say, Dexter's like, hey, I want to talk to mommy. I want to go to mommy. Brian's like, no. Gives him some type of nursery rhyme, but he's basically making sure that he's okay. And then all of a sudden, Harry comes storming in, and just like I said in the previous video, he just rips him off of Brian and kind of just leaves Brian there until Bobby comes to get Brian. So that's sort of, he remembers that as being the first time that Dexter was taken away from him. And then we fast forward and we see a little bit of when he gets to the home, he acts out a little bit. We see the whole situation that happened in the last episode. And Barbara, the social worker, comes and takes him away. That's the second time that he was taken away from Dexter. It's a cool little moment where you see his side of the cards. Like, hey, is Dexter coming with me? She's like, nope, taken to a family that can better deal with your situation. So then we sort of see him go to two different homes. I'm sure there were more, but we see two specifically because they sort of lead into some of the situations that occur when he gets older and decides to take a couple of people out. We'll get that on the back end when he talks to Harry. His first spot is he gets dropped off with a family called the Christians, and they have an older son. Now, it looks like all of these families are families that are either a group home or have already dealt with some foster kids. They take him to the Christians, and the Christians have an older brother or older son who pushes Brian into a closet and locks the door on him. Now, I will say this. Being a person who actually has a kid from the foster system, I think you should make your family all aware of the jacket that the kid is coming with and sort of the trauma that he's coming with. I don't know if putting a kid in a closet and locking him in there is for the best, considering that he was in the shipping container with his dead mom for days, and how that sort of recreates PTSD for him. So the second that he gets unlocked by the mom, who was just genuinely like, hey, why were you in the closet? And he just lashes out. And so it sort of seems that Brian consistently gets put in these scenarios where, yeah, he is always sort of the aggressor and the violent person, but a lot of it's been put on him. He's been pulled away from his brother. He's been pulled away from his mother. She's gone. And so now he's been put into these new situations where these people keep poking at him, and he does what he has to do to sort of lash back out. We see a continuation where he goes to another family, which is sort of a group home, where there's a bunch of different foster kids there, and one of them takes his food, and he responds back by just stabbing him with a fork. Another violent act that he sort of lashes back out. So then Barbara comes and takes him and said, the only thing that we can really do for you now is put you in a mental home, like for youth, a mental hospital for kids. We see him sort of age up in the system, but while he's aged up in that system, he finds himself connected to one of the orderlies named Raul, who he felt like, hey, Raul had my back. He's always been the constant that I've had since I've been here. He sees me, he gets me, he understands me, until he confronts him when he learns that Raul has been taking the drugs that he's supposed to be having to make him better and eventually maybe get out of there. He's been selling them to someone else. And then so he hauls off and to start whooping Raul's ass till he gets then put into a padded room. We then catch back up with him actually having a therapy section with Dr. Petrie. And this is where things turn real quickly. And so we sort of connect everything back to where Brian sort of is in current day. But Dr. Petrie says, you're making a lot of good progress. And I'm proud of you. And at that point, Brian is like, well, cool. Can I see him now? And the him is Dexter's. Like, can I go see Dex now? And Dr. Petrie's like, I don't think that's a good idea. I think he is the trigger for you. Like, he is that anger trigger, that violent trigger. Like, it's going to sort of regress you back. I don't think you should be seeing him. And at that point, Brian's like, well, what the hell am I doing here then? Like, what is this? What are we doing all of this for? He kind of is like, well, you've served your purpose here. And then he violently kills him. And so I tongue-in-cheekingly said, Brian has some valid points. This isn't one of them. I think when he gets to the Harry piece of it at the end, that's when some of those points come up. But here, he just violently kills Dr. Petrie. Like, he bashes his head in, he takes a poker, and just basically the crime scene that LaGuardia and Harry came to, we see it in real time, and we see a lot of the just visceral anger that Brian is pent up and holding. But then he takes the car, gets the keys, takes that car, and moves over to Miami, which is where we sort of have seen how that car wound up where it did, and how basically everything sort of comes full circle. We saw the Brian side of it. We then pick back up with Dex following Aaron after after basically letting him go, so he could follow him and lead him to Nikki. Spencer makes his way to a large boat that's literally about a half a mile away from the precinct. And Dex is like, well, son of a bitch. Like, he's literally been right here, like so close. We've been searching and scouring everywhere else, and he's literally been a half a mile away from the precinct, which does make sense because there's a lot of times where Aaron has made it back to the precinct so much faster, so quick, and now it makes sense because he was literally blocks away. Harry and Deb go by Bobby's bedside with his wife and kind of just are there to be there for him. They relieve the wife of the shift and say, Harry's like, okay, we will be here. We will watch it. While they are there, though, LaGuardia comes in and is like, hey, we got a pretty violent death, a murder that's come up. It's been a body spotted on a rooftop. And Harry's like, well, cool. I promised Bobby's wife that I'm going to stay here, so you can go ahead and handle it. And LaGuardia's like, I appreciate that you think you trust me enough to let me go do this. But she gets that look like, you need to see what this is, because this is a lot. Harry then goes out into a hallway with LaGuardia, and LaGuardia's like, hey, look, this body was chopped 10 ways from Sunday. A chainsaw and like body parts all over the place. And Harry's like, well, who's the person? And LaGuardia tells him that it was Barbara Plimpton. Immediately clicks to him. That's the social worker. We even see a little point of it. Again, a little cheap tactic. We don't need to have it read out to us. We understand that the two connect. But Barbara was the social worker, and it immediately hits Harry. And Harry's like, oh, crap. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't let on to LaGuardia. LaGuardia asks, like, hey, you know that name? And she's like, nope. Harry continues to lie. But Harry does go tell Deb, like, hey, can you watch the bedside by Bobby? I got to go to this case. And Deb's like, yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here. Go do your thing. So back on the boat, Dex follows Spencer onto it and gets a bit turned around in the corridor trying to follow him. Like he's not really on top of him to the point that he's basically a level below him. And so what he decides to do, smart, is to just make a whole lot of noise to let Aaron know that his presence is on the boat, so that he's not alone. And Aaron's like, crap, all right, Dex is here. But it's clear that Aaron is going straight to Nikki to do something, and Dex is just trying to buy time so that he can pull Aaron away enough to give Nikki a little bit of a heads up and a little bit of time before so Dex can get to him. To that point, that Dex then shuts the lights off because he says, I work so much better in the darkness. So he's basically trying to put the playing field on his level. Since he doesn't know this boat, he doesn't know it, I'm going to shut the lights off so that at least I have some type of a playing ground to play with. Harry and LaGuardia arrive on the scene of the rooftop, and Harry immediately asks where Dex is. And Masuka's like, Dex is off today. Harry's like, okay, cool. But then Harry knows that basically on the photos that he has seen in the previous crime scenes that Brian is somewhere searching and looking at this and looking to see if Dex arrives. So he steps out and says like, hey, I'm going to step out for a little bit. He steps out and he's trying to look to see if he finds Brian, and he spots Brian on the rooftop a little bit away. And so he makes his way off to that without really telling anybody. So LaGuardia eventually does come out to look for him, and nobody knows where the hell he's at. He just ghosted. So then back on the boat, Aaron tries to sort of trap Dex with putting a flashlight down and tries to shoot a flare at his back when he's trying to grab the flashlight, but he misses. And then a fight ensues, and they're going tit for tat. It's a pretty gnarly battle. They go for it. But in this one, Aaron gets the better of Dex. He hits him with something in the ribcage, basically that just takes him out. And then he makes his way down to the room where he's basically holding Nikki. He looks below him, and he then starts to flood the room that Nikki is in. Now, Nikki is also chained to the floor, so there's not a whole lot he can do about this. Now, Dex immediately comes in and is like, oh my God, what are you doing? He's your son. To which Aaron responds, is he? And it's the first time that I kind of now see why I still don't quite get the judge's kid and why he chose that kid, other than just like, hey, I'm trying to establish a pattern so it doesn't immediately fall back on me. But now I can see why he can be so callous towards Nikki. Somewhere in all of this, he found out that Nikki wasn't his son. And this has set him off on the deep end. So Dex tries to he catches it and sort of tries to angle it a different way. It's like, okay, he is still an innocent kid. Like, what are we doing here? Like, why is this the thing? He's like, he's an innocent kid. What kind of monster are you? And Aaron responds back like, well, let's see what kind of monster you are. Are you going to come after me, or are you going to save him? You only got one option. You can't do both. And then he runs off, and Dex is like, well, I got to save the kid. So he tries to save him. He jumps into the thing, tries to swim up and grab Nikki to bring him up for air. But he doesn't realize that Nikki is chained. So he has to go back up, grab a crowbar to like pry him out. While he's doing that, it feels like Nikki is sort of taking too much water into his lungs and he passes out. But Dex still brings him up. He gives him CPR, mouth to mouth, resuscitates him, gets him back going. And then without really being seen, sort of whispers to him like, help is on the way. Hang tight. We got you. And then he shoots up flares. They're half a block away from the police station. So shoots up 3 flares, and the police come in, guns blazing, quickly to the scene to pick up Nikki. A pretty good come to Jesus moment for Deb. Deb is sitting by Bobby's bedside and kind of just talking about life. And it's like, yeah, I effed up. I punched Tiff in the nose and kind of redirected my life, and maybe it messed things up, but I still apparently have a shot at getting to Florida State. But I don't know if that's what I want. She's just really having a conversation with Bobby. But she's basically saying, I need a new game plan. Like, I've lost my mom. I've lost my best friend. I've lost my brother. He's not really around anymore. She's just going through it. And she kind of needs to find a new direction in life. And we sort of see what that is in the back end of this episode. So Brian is looking over, this is probably my favorite scene of this finale. Brian is looking over the crime scene to see if he can find Dex. Like, Dex, where are you? Dex, where are you? And then when he tries to leave, he is met by Harry at gunpoint. Harry says, "We need to talk." It's kind of hard to say that when you have a person at gunpoint, but I get it. Brian doesn't seem to be the most stable person to have a conversation with. He wants to run down the crimes that Brian has sort of done. He's like, "I understand Dr. Petrie. I get it. He's your therapist. I understand Raul, your orderly, had a direct effect on you. And I get Barb. Like I get her. Why the other two victims?" And that's when Brian lets him know, well, one of them was at the Christians, the very first home that I went to after you guys, and he was the older brother that locked him into the closet. So I went back and killed him. The other was the one who stole this food. Now, if you're going to kill them, the one that actually locked you in the closet, I could see that one being the case. I'm not so sure about the guy who stole your food. You stabbed him with a fork. That seemed like that was a good 1-to-1. But it just shows you how broken Brian is and how anyone has done wrong to him, he is going to play that back tenfold. To that point that Harry says that your therapist was right. You should not have contact with Dex. I don't want you to talk to him at all. I don't want you to have any outreach with him. And Brian's like, well, it's a little too late. And I'm not going to lie to you. I missed this piece completely. Probably because it happened so early in the season that I completely forgot what the guy looked like. But when Dex went out on his very first case and they had a lunch at the one restaurant, the person came up to him and was like, "Hey, are these foods taken?" And Dex was like, "Yeah, the rest of my crew is coming over to me." And that was Brian. Crazy, 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 crazy. But yeah, that was Brian who was already sort of making that outreach to him. But Brian asked Harry, like, well, how did you do this? How did you get him to forget that he has a brother? Like, he didn't even look like he knew me. Like, how did you get him to forget that he had a whole life before you? And then Harry kind of lets him know, like, he was so young, and he was so traumatized that he just managed to he blocked that all out. And Brian's like, well, that's convenient. That is very convenient. And then he gets into him, like, is that why you threw me away? Because if he can easily compartmentalize and block that out for him, it's easier to throw me away because I bring up all of those bad things for him. I bring up the idea that you don't have to tell your son that you were banging his mom and that you had his mom become a snitch and that you're responsible for her getting dismembered in front of him. You don't have to explain any of those things to him because you have compartmentalized that to him to a point where you're just like, nope, you seem like the hero in all of this. It's a line that he uses in reference to Harry, that Laura also used in reference to Harry, where you're playing this big hero, but you're not really the hero. Like, you caused all of this. All of this happened because of you. When do you take some sort of responsibility for it? Your response was that you will bury the one remaining relative that Dex has so far in the system that you don't even have to worry about or think about this again. And you can have Dexter all to yourself. To the point that Harry says, like, I never meant to hurt you, but my job was to protect Dex. You couldn't be saved. Dex could. And so I took him and tried to give him the best life that I could. Brian keeps saying that Dex needs him, but in truth, he needs Dex. Dex would be A-okay without him back in his life. He would have no knowledge, wouldn't be worried about it. Like, nothing would come up for Dex had Brian never actually re-entered his life. Now, people who have seen the original series, we know that Brian does re-enter his life, and it does sort of open up a can of worms and a cavalcade of things for Dex as it goes along. But I think he would have been fine not having this piece. But Harry's like, look, all the pain and whatnot is going to come back rushing into his life if you enter his life. It's going to be best if you don't. For somebody who says that they care about their little brother so much, is that what you want for your little brother? Do you want your brother to remember being in that shipping container? Do you want him to remember seeing that he saw his mom get dismembered in front of him? Do you want that for him? You have that. You know what that pain is like. Do you want that for Dex? He says, like, he never would have had a good life with you, Brian. And while, yes, a lot of the things that I did put this situation, put this roadmap in place for the both of you and for Laura, um, two things can be true at the same time. Like I can have been an asshole and made all of that stuff occur, but I am also the best thing that can happen to Dex. And I think we need to decide if that's what we want for Dex going forward. Harry does this thing a little bit again where he did it with Laura, where he's like, can't you see that I'm the best option for this? He keeps patting himself on the back. And Brian calls him out just like Laura did. Like, you keep thinking you're the hero in all of this. And I don't know why that is the case. Harry then says he's going to bring Brian in. And Brian's like, I'm not going to prison. You're going to have to end me. You're going to have to kill me. He says, you're going to have to finish what you started when you threw me away 17 years ago. To that point that Harry sort of sees Brian as little Brian for a little bit and kind of has a moment where he puts the gun down. But then Brian tells him, no, man up. And he puts the gun to his temple. Harry originally has his finger on the trigger, and then he releases it. At that point, Brian socks Harry in the face and handcuffs him to a pole there, and eventually writes with the blood off of his head, "You're right," and just leaves him there. Leaves him with the gun, leaves him with the keys to get out. He just says, "No, you're right." In that moment, he got to Brian, and Brian understood that, like, yeah, I'm not the best thing for Dex, and maybe I should keep it away from him. My therapist, even though I beat his freaking face in, he's a trigger for me, and I don't want to be a trigger for him. So if he is well adjusted, there's no problems with Dex, then I don't think I need to re-enter his life like that. Now, we'll talk about that piece at the very end. Becca is at home, chilling, watching the news, just trying to find any type of information or see if any news comes out about Nikki at all. Nelson, her guy, comes down the steps like, "Hey, you coming to bed?" She's like, "No, I won't. I'll be up there in a minute, but I'm just going to try to see if anything pops about Nikki." Then we hear a scuffle, and we see Nelson just starts tumbling down the steps. It's at that point that Aaron comes storming down the steps and is screaming like a madman, like, you lied to me, Becca. You lied to me. And that he's going to kill her, and that you lied to me. I trusted you. You said that Nikki was mine. And so it's clear that all of this sort of came off of him felt like he got betrayed by Becca. I still don't quite understand the Powell piece of this and why he had to do one, other than I just needed to sort of set a precedent so that it doesn't directly come to me. That's the only reason why. Like, I want to set up a quote unquote pattern so that I'm not the first suspect that comes up with just the Nikki one of them. But he's at the bathroom door. Becca makes itself to, I think, the bathroom and sort of locks herself in. Aaron just freaking out, like, let me in. And all of a sudden, Dex comes and uses that great drug cocktail he has and puts Aaron to sleep. And then he drags him out of the house without really being seen. No one knows that he's there. What is a kind of an important note, as he's dragging him out, he catches the newscast of the dismembered body that's on the rooftop that's in a bunch of pieces. Nothing really clicks for him, but he does have a moment to just pause and look at it, which important. Like, it doesn't trigger anything, but it's kind of like, oh, I saw that. Why does that hit me hard? I don't know. And then he carries on. He keeps moving. It's funny. Dex said, like, look, the logical thing for Aaron to have done was to have run away. But logic went out the window when you hate as much as he did. So I knew that Aaron was going to be returning here. And so that's how he was able to sort of get him there and drag him off. This part gave me a bit of a joy, because I will say this, that this series has done a good job of, because the interesting part of this, because Dex is Dex, and I know kind of what's going to happen to Dexter. He's going to be fine in the majority of this. So it's been kind of cool to see him gain things in the cool toolkit. But the premise of this story where it got really good is seeing the Harry and Brian aspects of this. But it's cool to see Dex sort of become, he even says it in this episode, I'm almost in my final form. Just gaining those few things to sort of get to the Dexter that we sort of know when everything starts in the original series. But he takes a slice of pie out, and he has Aaron on his table, his kill table there, and yeah, Dex asks him, like, how does it feel to ruin your entire legacy? Like, everything you've built is now just a waste. You've thrown it all away. Aaron's kind of just happy. He's like, I taught her a lesson. Like, she will never not be scared again. Like, she's going to be frightened forever. She's not going to feel safe ever again. And Dex is like, well, that may be true, but Nikki's alive. And it's because Nikki's alive and Nelson's alive and Becca's alive, they at least have a shot at a happily ever after. You, not so much. You're going to die here. It's then that Dex gets really into him and kind of like, look at you. You get to die knowing that you failed as a cop, as a father, as a husband, as a human being. To that point that Aaron says, if you only knew how much your father has failed you. And Dex is like, huh? This isn't about Harry right now. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that right now. But that's a hard hitting line. Doesn't mean anything to Dex right now, but it does as the viewer who's seeing everything else that Harry, yeah, you've done a lot of shit to put Dex in this situation. Dex eventually takes Aaron out and then starts bagging him up and putting rocks on him and basically becoming the final form of the start of the Bay Harbor Butcher, where he starts putting them in the bay and then throwing the bodies in trash bags in the bay. I smiled a lot there. I was like, so it begins. I think his overview even says something like, I almost feel complete. Like, I almost feel like this is my final form. We catch up with Harry back at home, picking up his drinking again. And then he catches on the news that Nikki's been rescued. And that he was in fact being held captive by Aaron. And then Dex comes home, and Harry says, "Your instincts were right about Spencer, and I should have listened to you. Spencer would have been caught by now, and Nikki would have been rescued a long time ago. I never should have stopped you from going after you. I'm sorry I didn't listen to you." And Dex was like, "It's all good. I didn't listen to you either. I killed his ass." I killed his ass. He's dead. He won't harm anybody else ever again. It's at that point that Harry asks, "Well, if you did that, was the Nikki rescue you too?" And Dex is like, "Yes, that was me as well. Dad, he was trying to submerge him underwater, like he was trying to drown him." It's at that point that Harry's like, "Well, I saw in Spencer what I wanted to see, not who he actually was." And Dex says that Aaron wasn't born a monster. He mentioned this in the last episode. Aaron wasn't born a monster. Something happened to us in his life that made him become this monster. Unlike me, and I was born this way. And Harry kind of just like, "Yep, you were." Although he has flashbacks of seeing where Dex was not that way at all. Dex was perfectly fine, a kind of happy-go-lucky kid. And it wasn't until that shipping container is sort of when that dark passenger bore for him. But Harry can't say that because we've tried to block all of that away. So at that point that Harry's like, I couldn't be prouder of what you become. Like, he is, we'll get into this. Harry is happy that Dex is using the code that he sort of put in place correctly. We see a little bit later when he's talking to him that he's like, look, I'm glad you had a choice. You could have continued to go after Aaron and left Nikki there, but you stopped for a moment. Instead of doing your thing and going after him, you saved Nikki first, then went back to him. You made a choice with your code, and I'm so happy about it. Back at school, Sophie comes up to Deb just to check on her because she heard about the Geo incident. She's like, "Look, I just want to make sure that you're good." Um, and Deb's like, I'm sorry, I apologize. For what? I don't know. Like, she apologizes, like, "Yes, Dex is my brother. He's a weirdo, but I should have had your back a little bit more." I don't think she did anything wrong, honestly, in regards to backing up her brother. Sophie was being a nutcase, but she at least does apologize to her friend, and they end up being cordial and cool again. Back at the precinct, Harry continues to put on this face that he's completely ignorant as to uh, where Aaron Spencer is and where his whereabouts are. He and Angel sort of commiserate over how Aaron was able to pull the wool over all of their eyes, and then uh, Angel asks about the serial killer case that they have, and Harry's like, "It wasn't a serial killer." And LaGuerta is overhearing this, but he's like, "It wasn't a serial killer. I let LaGuerta kind of run with it, but I gave her the benefit of the doubt, but it's all just random. That's not going to sit well with LaGuerta." And it's clearly that he's doing this to hide Brian, which now that she at least knows Brian's name, she's going to look into that more than I think he would like. We see Tanya bringing Dex into forensics into Miami full time. He's no longer an intern. I'm going to say this, and maybe it'll come to fruition in the second season if they get one. Sarah Michelle Gellar, being the name that she is, felt very underutilized in this show as a whole. If there's one thing that I can say, like, that's weird, it's her and her sort of arc or whatever. She's just not really around much, which is odd. Bobby comes back. He's healthy. He gets a welcome reception as he is wheeled out of the hospital, and it sort of makes Dex think that um, he does what he does because sometimes people deserve to live, which is his way of saying, like, I kill the people, the bad people, so that the good people can stay alive or can live, and so that gives him the peace in his brain. Harry takes Deb and Dex out, celebrate Dex now being full time and a real officer, and his promotion, and learns that Deb got accepted to Miami Metro's Police Academy, which for the first time I think Harry responds the correct way to something that Deb does. But Harry's proud of her. Deb says, like, "I know this isn't what you wanted, but I feel like this is what my calling and this is what I need to do." And Harry's like, "If you feel like that's your calling, then I am all for it." And then Deb's like, "Well, cool. Now you guys have to include me in all those secret conversations that you keep having." And Harry and Dex sort of look at each other like, "Yeah, that ain't going to happen." Deb, Dex, and Harry sort of celebrate, dance, and do all their thing. And Dex thinks of how family can give him a sense of normalcy. And then we see Brian kind of looking on in the window, uh, longingly for his brother. And that's the season. It's interesting because the Brian piece of this, when we know what we know when we get there, but Brian um, clearly in the moment said, "You're right," and like, you're the better person for him. But he clearly still has the urge, like, I still want to be around my brother, like I'm still getting called to my brother. What's going to happen, especially if we get a season two? And granted, this could end here. Like, I don't necessarily know if a season two is coming, but this could end here and kind of just bleed right into the first season of Dex, or we can flesh more things out. If we flesh more things out, though, two things that are going to happen in the second season, I think, because I don't know if this how long this can go, because we're going to come right up on the edge of when we get to that first season. But Brian is going to, at some point, follow Dex on one of his kills and see that Dex is literally just like him. And so, for all the pontificating and say Harry is saying, like, "Oh, I made him safe and I got him a good home," he is just as bad as Brian is. And so Brian will then be like, "Well, we are one and the same. Then Harry didn't save you as much as I thought he would." So Brian is going to now, if he finds that out, it's going to make him be like, Harry, you're full of shit. You're not saving my brother. He's just like me. And now he and I should be more and more in conversation. Bay Harbor and Ice Trucks, we should have a conversation and talk to each other. Two, and the other thing that I think will happen in another season, hopefully we get more Sarah Michelle Gellar. But two, I think we need to see Harry seeing what Dex does. Because here's the thing. Harry feels proud. He's like, oh yeah, you're doing quote unquote the Lord's work, if you will. Like you saved Nikki, you're taking people out. But for him, he's just hearing about it. He's like, oh yeah, you did them, you're taking them off. But if I don't actually have to see, there's a lot of times where people will say things or do things, but because it's not face to face with them, it doesn't affect them in the same way. We know, or at least I know, Harry ends up in the situation that he does with his life gone because he catches Dex in one of these kills. That's going to have to happen. And when that does happen, and it just has a just damning effect on Harry. When that happens, and it does happen, it's going to be just monumental for Harry, because now he's going to be face to face with like, oh crap, I didn't. This kid is just as bad as the Bryans, as anybody else. Like, I didn't save him the way that I thought I did, and he's just as much of a monster. And I have led myself to believe that he's doing everything good, but a person being capable of doing this, maybe I was wrong. But yeah, good, a really good, strong first season for Original Sin, and I do hope they continue on. I don't need the full 6 or 7 that the original series got, but if you give me 2, maybe 3 strong seasons, so we can then just bridge into that first, I will take that. But I'm also perfectly fine if this ends here because I think we put all the sort of tools in his toolkit to become the Bay Harbor Butcher. But I think the one thing that's sort of missing is seeing Harry actually see what Dexter does. And once we see that, all bets are off. What did you guys think about the first season as a whole? I will say this: I will be watching Dexter Resurrection. I see all the Dexter fans. I see you guys watching and viewing, so I will be keeping that one going too. And then for new shows, now that Silo and Dexter are off, I probably will be doing White Lotus season 3, and maybe, and I don't know, I'll figure out what the second show it is. But I was thoroughly surprised with this Dexter Original Sin, and the bar or the level that Dexter Resurrection's got to put in front of it now is quite high. What did you guys think about the first season, and specifically this season finale? Go to leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on X at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDid@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name. That's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any other place podcasts. We're there. I am going to go lay down. But like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.